And now we've got attention of a lot more people, and they're promoting things like oatmeal and protein powders and these healthy snacks all throughout their diet. And obviously that gets the attention and influences the youth coming in underneath them that want to achieve the physique like them. And there's just a big lack of transparency perhaps around the genetics, what else goes on behind the scenes, maybe the performance enhancing drugs that are used. But you can see that when you're a part of the general population, or maybe you are a part of that 60-70% that are overweight and suffering from some metabolic or inflammatory disease, that they're not the people that we should be really going to for advice, because there's a very big difference between bodybuilding and health a lot of the time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this is the reason I jumped on social media about a year and a half or 2 years ago. Personally, I detest social media, but I realised now, the pragmatist in me realises this is the way to communicate to the masses, and this is how everyone's doing it. You don't have to be talented to be famous now. You just, as you said, need to get out there and reveal your physique on Instagram or Facebook to be famous. And these people are getting the limelight, and sometimes the advice that's being put out is not correct. I think overall the advice to get out there and move your body is completely good, and I agree with it.
Right.
That's what's common to a lot of these things. But you know, they are putting out a lot of advice on, especially processed milks and processed proteins and protein powders.
Yeah, the ambassador programs and shit.
That's right. And so everyone's kind of trying to sell a product. Fundamentally, like what I've tried to do with social media is I'm not selling anything. I'm just kind of pointing out the ridiculous state at
and saying, well, here it is. You now choose what to do with this information, but at least be coming from a position where you're actually informed.
Yeah, that's right. And I've had a lot of colleagues, speak detrimentally, speak with a lot of sarcasm about my presence on social media, because that's not the thing for doctors to do, right? But says who?
It's great. I love it. We need more of it. It's refreshing.
Yeah, but this is the currency that now runs our network. It is fundamentally social media. This is how you have to communicate with the masses, how you get a message out, and I feel compelled to do it. And I think a lot of doctors in the space, like myself, feel compelled to do it. And this is how we're going to do it. It's just we've got to be careful about the boundaries and not pushing the boundaries, obviously. But I think if someone's selling a product, I'm always very, very cautious about their intention.
I know what you mean. See, when I first, was a little gym rat around 18, 19 years old and sort of entering the PT space, not that I do much PT anymore, but in my mind, trying to get myself into good enough shape or getting enough attention to land myself a optimum nutrition in sponsorship or something like that was what was key to me getting, I suppose, the gratification or credibility to be able to then get the clients to ultimately make me more money. And I now sit with a very different perspective, having had sort of 13, 14 years of experience in that space, and look back and go, wow, I'm glad that never happened, because I agree completely. As soon as I see you marketing or endorsing a product, I can't believe a word you say. I feel like your integrity has just been completely cut out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's interesting, like you see people start off with the right intentions in this space, but over time, as they gain more popularity, the lure of sponsorship, we're all human. And I think that's the thing. This is why my personal journey it's a very objective journey. I try and put out as much science as I can, because fundamentally, if the science is done right, very rarely does it lie. And that is the trick. You've got to find the science that's done right. And this is what I'm trying to do. And hopefully, we have more traction in the medical field with doctors doing this. I think so. I have hope for the future, that a lot of these younger doctors will see. But then again, I look around at our junior doctors coming through and I see obesity and people that are clearly not quite understanding health. And this is at a very early stage of their life. And I think, well, this is it's a bit of a worrying future.
It scares me too, because when we magnify that with, as we said, the importance over people's feelings these days and not offending them. So it's a lot easier for the the people that we've categorized there to project their insecurities about being out of shape or perhaps ignorant, and labeling you rude or arrogant, or me for that matter, for just for presenting objective data.
Exactly right. This is the thing. That's exactly right. I think we've got to be very, very careful we don't enter this state where we are scared to project real science. You know what I mean? Not opinion, but real science.
The truth cannot become offensive, but it already is.
It already is, and we exist in a territory that is worrisome. But we can only do what we can do. And I think the longer I do this, I'm having people seek me out for the advice rather than me having to break it down for them. They already know what I do when they seek me out. That makes it a lot easier for us.
Mate, there's two more things that I'd really like to dive into a little bit more today before consuming any more of your time. And that was, if we can go back to the cholesterol, because again, just in my demographic of listeners, it's something that comes up quite often. Oh, don't you need to be concerned about the high fat diet with cholesterol? Or is my cholesterol too high? And they present it to you on their blood markers. And everybody's quite narrow minded in this belief. Oh, HCL is the good, LDL is our bad cholesterol, and not understanding that actually has been broken up into different particles as well. And not all of it's probably bad. And particularly as men, for example, we need cholesterol. Our sex hormones are made from cholesterol. So if you don't have any cholesterol, you probably can't get your dick hard.
Well said. Well said. I think there was a powerlifter who posted something on Twitter, and I almost wanted to kind of retweet it. I didn't. I don't want to offend anyone, but basically said, fellas, if you're struggling to get it up in the morning, or if you're not waking up without it, something's probably not right. And I think that is a very, very good synopsis there. So let's break down cholesterol. So
Please.
Cholesterol and heart disease, okay? I mean, that's the link, right? And I think we've got to get your listeners to understand there's something called an atherogenic triad, a triangle, okay? At the top of that triangle lies low HDL, okay? Atherogenic means you're putting down plaque or creating atherosclerosis, which is basically this gunk that builds up in our arteries, full of calcified, horrible cells. And so at the top of that atherogenic triad, we've got a low HDL, risk factor number one. The second part of that atherogenic triad is high triglycerides, okay? High triglycerides are one of the most important parameters to assess in an individual to assess if they're metabolically unhealthy. If you've got those two things, you've got LDL here. But LDL is complicated because that atherogenic triad, it's not simply just LDL, it's oxidized LDL particles. This is not something that is measured in routine blood tests. In fact, it costs money, and most general practitioners, most cardiologists actually don't even know that this thing exists. But LDL can be separated into at least 7 particles. The first 2 particles,
wow,
LDL,
7.
Yeah, the first 2 particles, LDL1 and 2, give you something called a type A pattern, which is very low risk for heart disease, whereas the type B pattern is the oxidized pattern. So really, when people talk about cholesterol, I say, what is the quality of your cholesterol? Not the quantity, it is what is the quality. I will look at HDL quantity, triglyceride quantity, and I can almost predict what the LDL quality will be. And that is the key thing. So we are looking to suppress LDL. However, what is the quality of the LDL? There are, considering we've said that 75 to 80% of the world is unhealthy and metabolically unwell. I mean, we say 90%, 88 to 90% of America is metabolically unhealthy. Their LDL particles are poor, right? And they're going to have more of the oxidized LDL pattern. In those populations, of course, suppressing LDL is beneficial because you're suppressing the oxidized parts particles. As well. Yeah, and that's why sorry, Jack, go on.
What foods and factors are contributing to a higher oxidized LDL?
Yeah, so a high triglyceride state generally implies a high energy input, as in energy excess or energy toxicity, right? So
overeating.
Yeah, pretty much. So overeating, energy toxicity, high insulins, these are going to drive oxidation. Additionally, there are other factors that drive it. Potentially excessive consumption of coffee might drive excessive LDL oxidation. I believe, and this may be controversial, endurance sport, right? Huge amounts of endurance sport may not be conducive to a non-oxidized state. I think that is driving an oxidative pattern as well, right? And this is why
would that be from potentially linked to, I don't want to call it a chronically elevated cortisol, but you're spending a lot of time in that state?
Yeah, reactive oxidation species, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those reactive oxidation species are going to drive oxidation pretty much of your particles and oxidation of basically yourself. So exercise, it's a fine balance. There is a point where you tip over into doing excess, and I'm sure in your industry you've seen that before. And it's not uncommon to see endurance athletes who on the surface can appear very, very healthy, very lean, very insulin sensitive, who've got a huge burden of coronary artery plaque on imaging, okay? So there are some factors. There's some talk that things like seed oils, which are very rich in polyunsaturated fatty acids, can be easily oxidized. I think that there's probably an element of that as well.
Put vegetable oil in there too?
Yeah, vegetable oils, which are very PUFA 6 rich, polyunsaturated fatty 6 rich, omega-6 rich, potentially might be driving it. Hypoglycemia, right, where you've got very elevated blood sugars, if you're diabetic or a pre-diabetic, that blood sugar then binds your arteries, so you can call them N-glycation products. Then that surface of that blood vessel then becomes very, very prone to take up these LDLs internally.
So they can see that the LDL is actually being increased here, not by fats, but by carbohydrates in refined forms.
Yeah, that's right. Just energy excess, and that can come from excessive fat intake as well. Excess refined fat intake, like if you're guzzling butter constantly and you don't have the energy output to actually burn the thing off, then you're ending up with a state of energy toxicity. You can do that with protein as well. You can overeat protein and get fat. However, it's just pretty bloody difficult to do so.
I was about to say, it'd have to be, what would you say that upper threshold would be there if we're looking at sort of grams per kilogram of body weight?
Yeah, it depends on the individual. Like people with kidney impairment, right? If they've got renal failure, that protein intake has to be adjusted. It definitely can cause protein toxicity. But
that's a very specific case though, yeah.
Yeah, a specific case. I've just got to point it out in case I lose my license.
Of course.
But for most people, they can consume 2 to 3.5, 4 grams. I think beyond 4 grams, you're starting to eat above satiety, right? Like a lot of bodybuilders, they end up.
It just becomes hard to do.
It just becomes pretty bloody difficult to do, and if you're consuming those sort of levels of protein, the satiety aspect is very, very high. I reckon even at a protein intake of about 1.5 to 1.8 kilograms grams per kilogram, you're hitting satiety very, very, very quickly. So we
can kind of see there, just in a summary of that statement, that there's a very big difference between having somebody on low calories when it's coming from nutrient dense animal protein, good quality fats, than having them just restricted on low calories under a flexible dieting type, if it fits your macros approach.
Yeah, that flexible dieting falls into the realm of the bodybuilders and the really fit young people. I mean, you can't tell an elderly diabetic to flexibly diet. It's ludicrous, and this is the issue that I've had with people like Lane Norton. We've gone back and forth with our debates on this sort of stuff, and what he suggests will work for healthy members of the population, but we're not dealing with healthy members of the population. In addition, he's targeting a group that is highly motivated and compliant, and probably have a personality type that can follow it. Most people don't, and most people, they just need to be taught how to do it intuitively, so they're not reliant on an app. And
what's interesting in that, just for people that sit back and observe, or have only just been introduced to you, much like me today in a proper conversation, is you're always very calm. You're a nice person. Lane has to be an asshole to make his point.
I find it entertaining.
It is.
I always sort of tune in to watch him decompensate and lose his mind, because it gets to a point where we're just butting heads with people. I think we can teach people how to do it properly, but the key message that I'm trying to promote is really try and get animal source foods into your diet. Don't fall for this media hype. And I think if you can make protein